I want to talk about money from a biblical perspective. Okay. I know that a lot of you that watch this, as I do, have more of a biblical worldview and believing that the Bible is a really great source of wisdom to go to. Now, whether you're a Jew or a Christian or not, I don't think is relevant. As it's a little relevant, but I think it's more relevant of understanding the Bible is a is incredibly insightful in how to build wealth. When you think about the most affluent, influential group of people in the world today, a very, very small set of the percentage of the population are people that are Jewish because they've learned these biblical principles of wealth. So my best friends, in fact, almost every my best friends have almost always been Jewish. When I was in elementary school, my best friend was Jewish. When I was in college, my best friend was Jewish. Today, Jordan Rubin, one of my best friends, is Jewish. And so I've learned a lot about the mindset about money that they've taken from the Old Testament, from the Bible. And then Christians would be next in terms of who has created the most wealth, and it's because of these biblical principles. And so I want to share some of those principles with you today that will help you increase your wealth. And the first one is the parable of the talents. And the parable of the talents says this: it's God, also known as the master in the story, gives three people money. These are his servants. And so he said, I'm going to give one person 1 talent, another person 2 talents, another person 5 talents. And he said, hey, I want you to go and multiply these talents. And by the way, these talents could be seen as money, as they are in the parable. They're actually money, but I also think symbolically they could be the gifts God has given you. Maybe you have a gift of doing art or creating music or teaching or customer service, whatever it is, but taking that gift. And so with the one person, they go, that 5 person with 5 talents, they go and multiply and turn it into 5 talents. So let's say that person said, I'm good at teaching. I'm going to go and buy personal growth books and learn about being a better communicator and learn from other teachers. And I'm going to then become a better teacher. I'm also going to take the money I've made and I'm going to wisely invest it in land and real estate or stocks or companies or all these things and be wise about it over time. And I'm not going to go and spend money frivolously on, junk food and yachts that I'll never use just to look good, whatever. Okay. So the first person does 5, turns it into 5. The person with 2 turns it into 4. The person with 1, they said, oh, I'm going to go take that talent and I'm going to bury it in the sand. And then God comes back to the master and he says, well done to those 2 servants that doubled their talents. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. The person with 5, he's going to give them both more. The person with 1 talent who just buried it, now he didn't lose it, but he just buried it, didn't multiply it. He said, you evil and wicked servant. And God basically says, I'm going to take your 1 talent and give it to the person who has 5, actually 10 now. I'm going to give them the other one. Here's a couple lessons from this. One is that person with 1 talent believed that God was a sort of a ruthless person in a way. And I think the other people with those talents didn't believe that about God. They believed he was generous. They believed he was benevolent. They believe certain things about him. And so one of the parables of the story I don't hear people talk about a lot is, how do you view God? Do you view God as this sort of mean judge, or do you believe God is a generous father and you just want to please him? You want to help do what he initially called us to do in turning earth into a heavenly place and adding value to the lives of others, right? So if you believe the right things about God, that he is generous himself, you're more likely to be generous. If you believe that God is hoarding from you and makes it difficult and he's judging you constantly and all those things, then you're likely to take that talent and just kind of live in a fearful state, right? Live in a state. That's what the person said. He said, I'm afraid of you. I'm living in a state of fear. And the other thing about that too is you really got to think about this parable of the talents, about how do you multiply what you've been given? How do you multiply it? And that's part of that lesson here. And here's what this parable of the talents, this is Matthew 25, 14 through 30. Here's a small clip of it. And it says, everyone who uses what they have will get more. They will have much more than they need. But people who do not use what they have will have everything taken away from them. And so it's important to know that if you are a person who is not focused on multiplying, you're just saying, I'm just going to waste my life. I'm going to waste the talents God's been given me and waste my money on things. You'll actually have more even taken from you. And Proverbs 10:22 says, I think this is another important one. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. He adds no trouble to it. So the blessing of the Lord has no side effects. So there are a lot of people, if you're building and growing wealth, but it's coming at a cost to your family, like for instance, it's ruining your relationship with your spouse or your kids or even your colleagues, or it's destroying your health. That's not from God. Okay, you are trying to do things out of God's blessing. Okay, so remember the Proverbs 10:22. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no trouble to it. Okay, and so it's important to have that mindset about money. That if I read this story, by the way, about Steve Jobs. I put this in my new book. It's called Think This, Not That. And Steve Jobs, when he got to the end of his life, he said, you know what? I just want my kids to know why I wasn't there for them. And basically, he had put all his time in building Apple, and what an incredible company, but he had a terrible relationship with his kids and never really got to spend time with his kids. And so you think about, well, yeah, God, he was blessed financially, but was that from God or was that from the world? And so he had a lot of sorrow. He had a lot of sorrow at the end of his life because he built wealth, but he also sacrificed his faith and his family and his health for the God of mammon, for the God of money. And so it's just an important thing that we keep all of these things in perspective when it comes to how do we build wealth. Now, Tony Robbins has some really empowering advice when it comes to wealth and our beliefs. He says, the secret to wealth is simple. Find a way to do more for others than anyone else does. Become more valuable, do more, give more, be more, serve more, and you will have the opportunity to earn more. If you're in a career right now where you kind of feel you're at the bottom or the middle and you're just not bringing in, or even at near the top, and you don't feel like you know you can make a lot more, you don't feel like you're bringing in the finances that you're the maximum you want to, find ways to grow the company's bottom line. Find the ways to take your skill to a whole new level, to really become a linchpin, to become so valued with the company, they would never want to lose you. And then once you know you're close to that level, go into management and ask for a raise or seek out an opportunity with another company once you've been able to build that skill set. Again, what I'm not telling you to do is just become the doormat. And if they tell you you need to be doing 60 hours a week of just book work, I'm not telling you to do that. I am telling you to take whatever your skill is to the highest level possible and get paid the maximum you can as part of a company, especially that's adding value to the world and doing things in a moral way. I think about a lot of companies today, even if they paid me $10 million a year, I would never work for them. Never, because I believe what they're doing is evil in the world. I think about some of these financial organizations, whether it be BlackRock or others. I think about media companies like CNN. I would never work for them. Well, if they gave me airtime, then maybe I would, and if I could say what I wanted. But my point there is that, I wouldn't, because I think you got to remember, if you're sowing into something that's evil, you're going to reap evil. That idea around sowing and reaping is so important, that you're sowing good seeds that are going to bring up good crops. All right, I want to go back to the Bible here because I think this is an incredibly important verse in Malachi 3:10. This is the last book of the Old Testament. And when it comes to sort of the supernatural and spiritual aspects of money. And here's what God is saying through the prophet Malachi to the Israelite people. And he says this, he says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. Now, a tithe means 10%. So he said, bring your 10%, give your 10%. So he said, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse that there may be food in my house. He said, test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. Now, this is literally the only time in the entire Bible where God says, I want you to test me. Throughout the other time, Jesus is telling people, hey, we shouldn't be testing God. And the prophets are saying we shouldn't be testing God. Well, God says here, test me on this. He said, if you give 10% or more, I will, there's his exact words, I will throw open the floodgates of heaven and bring out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it for you, for your family. So I believe that this is a verse that not a lot of people have heard, not enough people have meditated on, and this is something I am incredibly aware and conscious of. And this is this principle of generosity. We should be incredibly generous, and we should be incredibly generous and also wise about where we give money. Let me give a couple examples of here. There are people who give money and that are generous. By the way, as a whole, when you look at the studies, the groups of people that are the most generous at giving money are people that are religious. It's Jews and Christians. They give more money. There was a study done, I want to say it's a Gallup or Pew Research that I read that went through and said people that are religious they give more. They donate more to charities and people in need. Okay. So going back to this though, if you're a person and you've brought in money, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to give money to just this person here and this person here, or this university over here, or this school I went to, and you give money there. Listen, I think that's good to be generous, but do I think it's the best? Not necessarily. Here's why. When you give money, you want to make sure it's going towards someone that's truly in need, and it's going to bless somebody and not hurt them. And so one of the things I always appreciate, for instance, is, there's a friend I have, several friends actually who do this. A couple of them are in North Carolina, and they tend to, they'll give money sometimes to the homeless, but more often that they will actually take them, sit down with them for a meal, have a conversation with them to make sure that when they're giving them money, it's not going and getting spent on drugs and alcohol. Now, listen, sometimes I think it's great just to give money. Chelsea and I will, when we were in Nashville and there are people by the road, like we really try and give almost every time. But I think it's an even greater form of virtue and charity if you can actually go and give food and give something you know will actually bring health to them and bless their life in that way. Think about today, if you give to a lot of universities, if you would go and give to a school, let's say, I don't know, an Ivy League school today, nearly every Ivy League school today is promoting a agenda that is very anti-God. What's crazy is, by the way, the Ivy Leagues, most of them were very Judeo-Christian or Christian organizations. Harvard, for instance, Princeton, Yale. I mean, these were founded by Christian people that were supposed to be building Christian virtues. Well, today they've absolutely turned their back and gone in the exact opposite direction. My point is this: do you think if you're giving to a group or organization, let's say a group of Satanists, I don't know, I'm just kind of going very far out there now, right? To prove my point. But if you're giving to that, do you think it's going to be the same sort of blessing in return? No, again, I think there are supernatural and spiritual principles we need to be aware of. So my point here is, when you give, do your best to give to something that you know is going to be doing good in the world. Give to your local church. Give to an organization that's saving women from sex trafficking. Give to an organization that's, bringing clean water. Give to an organization that gives microloans so people in certain areas of the world who can't get those can start businesses in those countries. Give to regenerative agriculture, something that heals the planet. But my point there is, give to something that does good in the world, not evil. So remember, as God says here, test me in this. It's the only place he says, test me. He will open the floodgates of heaven of blessing. And for me, I want to challenge you, focus on, if you want to build wealth, give 10% or more. Give that. Be dedicated to doing that. And I think you'll be amazed at what happens.